Adam is formed from the Adamah. You guys see these connections here. Closely related to the Hebrew word for humanity is the Hebrew word for ground, dirt, and soil. In Genesis 2, Adam is formed out of the Adamah. Literally, this is conveying a earth being, a being of the earth, formed of the ground. Ground is Adamah. Adam is from the Adamah. So humans and ground are inherently connected conceptually. So Adam is formed from the Adamah, from the desert wasteland, right? He's formed from the desert wasteland. There's no water, there's no shrub, there's no grass, nothing. Okay. What does that resemble? Does it resemble anything that we've already covered? You probably won't be able to identify it very easily because in your mind, it's probably the opposite. But conceptually, it's the formation from the waters, right? Because the only water is representative as chaos, but no life and only desert wasteland is also represented as chaos. It's these two extremes of all water and no land, all land and no water. These are both chaos realms. In the land of Israel, it's a very short sliver or skinny sliver of land with the Mediterranean Sea on the west and the Arabian Desert on the east. You see what I'm saying? These two, surrounded by these two realms of chaos, right? And so Adam is formed from a realm of chaos, a realm of death and disorder where there's no life and no water. Again, whereas in Genesis 1, water as a representative image was a thing that needed to be ordered, now it's a thing that is necessary to order things. So it's a reversal. So out of the chaos waters, God forms the cosmos, right? And now we're zooming into the dry land, and God is forming out of the dry ground, right? So this gets into your question about, it seems like this is a reversal of the plants on day 3 and then the humans on day 6. It's because we're looking at something specific. We're zooming into a part of the creation. We're zooming into a region. We're zooming into a land, and we're zooming into these individuals. And if anyone's wrestling with that, just speak up and we can talk through that. But the idea here is we are trained, people conventionally will talk as though these are like the same events, when the Bible is not necessarily presenting them as the same events, Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. But they're telling similar stories. That's another thing. They're telling repetitive pattern stories. So again, chaos from the waters, now chaos is the dry ground, right? Creation out of the dry ground. So we have now the setting is not chaos waters per Genesis 1, the Tehom, the Tohu Vabohu, formless and empty. The Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Now there's no shrub, there's no one to till the ground, there's no water, no rain, anything. What happens? It says that it's dry ground, dust, and earth. Then a mist or a stream or a dew rises from below. And what happens when you mix dirt with water? Mud. It turns into mud or clay, right? Clay. So dust is mixes with water, you could say. And out of that mixture is formed the man, the form of man. Do we have Adam yet? No, we're missing something. Something has to happen still. Yeah. The breath comes down from above and breathes into his nostrils. Do you guys remember we talked about the pagan statues that the pagans would hold these rituals to open the mouth and the nostrils of their idol gods, right? Okay. So now we have the dirt mixed with the water. The form of man comes out, the idol statue comes out of the ground, and into his nostrils is breathed by God the breath of life. And then he becomes a living being, it says, right? So dirt plus water plus breath. It's trying to give you a conception of what are humans made of, what is our fundamental elements that make us up, and why are these the things that give us life, and how can we see these things leave us when we die. Just a very simple thing. Remember, it's dust plus water plus breath. What is the dust? Try to think about dust. What does the dust represent? What is dust? Particles of sand, particles of dirt, particles. They're elements. They're tiny little things that are not connected. Tiny little things that are not connected, right? Kind of like the no form that is the waters. So the water is, you can't grab onto it, you can't hold it, it will slip through your fingers. So same thing, the dust represents things that are minuscule and spread apart and you can't see, right? Really, through the naked eye. You can, but like you have to like scrape, and then you're like, oh, I can see little dust particles. So the idea here is that God is forming out of these disparate, disintegrated things, and he's bringing them together and forming something out of that. So he's bringing together details of the world and bringing them together. Something else is these are the things primarily that will go away when you die.
They say ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
Dust to dust, yeah. So when you die, you stop breathing. Your blood will leave your body. The liquid that's in your body will leave it, and your body will turn into dust. Okay? When we die, our bodies do go into the earth. And remember, there's the conceptions of Sheol. The idea is now their body has returned back to the underworld, right? This made out of clay and dust language. This is another thing about the story of Adam. Readers of the Bible, they don't always realize that that's spoken of everyone. So Job, chapter 10, your hands fashioned, and this is Job speaking, your hands fashioned and made me altogether. Now, and would you now destroy me? Remember now that you have made me as clay, would you turn me into dust? Job is speaking of himself, that he's made up out of the ground and the dust. Isaiah 64, you are a father, we are the clay, you are the potter. We are all the work of your hand. Okay? The Spirit of God has made me. The breath of the Almighty gives me life. I am the same as you in God's sight. I too am a piece of clay. And then we talked a little bit about this famous, quoted all the time passage last week. You formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Why is the psalmist saying that they were in their mother's womb, but at the same time that they were intricately woven in the depths of the earth? Yeah. That's a good, yeah. So the idea is the ground a womb for Adam? And what does the ground represent? A womb for Adam. And does a womb symbolically represent the ground for our own mother? Does that make sense? Like there's a connection here between we are all coming forth from the waters, and we are all,
The dark place.
The dark place. Yes, the dark place. The place where, and we have a medical way of thinking about pregnancy, but in the ancient world, that is a very, very mysterious process. So this gets into the typology. Do you guys remember what typology is? It's the pattern that is discerned throughout the scriptures. It's a very important thing about connecting like Noah's Ark to the splitting of the Red Sea to the baptism is just one example. It's a biblical term. The word type appears in the Bible. It's the Greek word tupos, something that is a pattern. And so what you could say Adam is he is an archetype. Okay? Now, we mean archetype in contemporary English as though it simply is a manifestation of a pattern, and that's all it is. I'm not necessarily saying that. What archetype actually means in the Greek, arche, tupon, arche is first, right? And type would be pattern. So Adam is the first of the pattern, the first one, emblematic in the story of the Bible as the first one representative of a repeating pattern of humanity, right? Does this mean that he wasn't really, or is like there will be an argument between, was there a historical Adam? I would argue there was a historical Adam, but what he represents is what the Bible is trying to communicate. Does that make sense? What part he plays in the grand narrative, that is the point. Anyway, and again, the details that are described about him, that he's made of the dust and the clay, and that we are all made of dust and clay, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. I'm saying the details about him, it's trying to present to you how you should think about not just that figure, but how you should think about yourself. Okay, so Job 32, verse 8, it is the spirit in man, the breath of the Almighty, that makes him understand. Okay. So there's a conception between the breath that comes from God in that story that wakes Adam up. So the spirit in the man, the breath of the Almighty that makes him understand. The spirit is, we talked about this last week, the same word that is used of the thing that is hovering above the waters, right? In Genesis 1, the ruach, which is the same Hebrew word for wind and breath and spirit, okay? So what is the ruach? In the biblical worldview, the primary thing that animates and moves the world is unseen and invisible, okay? Unseen and invisible. It is the spirit of God is the thing that moves the world, right? His wind or his breath will be another way of saying it. It is understood as the same sort of thing that goes into you when you inhale and goes out of you when you exhale, okay? Wind or spirit is associated with the heavens or the skies because wind moves above the ground and rushes through the atmosphere and moves the tree branches and moves things, right? But the ground, the rocks, they tend to be unmoved, right? So it's the thing that moves other things in an unseen way. So everyone breathe into your own hand and feel your own ruach. Think about the fact that you are animated and energized, okay? You are actually able to move your body and your mouth is moving and you're able to speak, right? Wind and breath are inherently associated with spirit and consciousness because it is through your breath that you are able to speak. When you stop breathing, you become senseless and still. So when someone dies, their body continues on for a little bit, but you try to speak to them and they will not speak back. You can't wake them up, right? The breath has left them. When you stop breathing, you become senseless and still. The spirit has left the body, right? The breath has left the body. The spirit has left the body. Your body decomposes because there's no breath, right?
That's true with the animals too.
It is, yeah. So the animals are said to have the ruach in them as well. So you can't necessarily say the ruach is like a specific thing that only humans have. Even though we tend to mean spirit means like our unique sense of consciousness. We certainly there are specific Bible verses that will say like you have taught us more than the animals. It will say of human beings that God has taught us more than the animals and things like that. But it is the same kind of thing in the biblical conception that moves the animals and moves trees blowing in the wind and moves your body. Does that make sense? It's sort of a personal energy because it is the spirit of God. So, but you can't say that the spirit of God is not an energy. You know what I mean? But it is also a person. But so we have Adam, this figure, this archetypical figure. Again, that doesn't mean that he's not a historical person. It just means that he represents every human being in the same way that the image of God represents God. Every image represents God, right? So he's a creature of clay plus the breath of God, right? He represents the king priest in the Eden temple, and we'll talk about what that means as we continue, because he is connected with that garden in a very intimate way, and we'll talk about what the garden is, and that will enlighten you to who Adam is supposed to be and who Eve is supposed to be. Obviously, he's the husband to Eve. Now, later biblical conception will blame the sin of the world on Adam. So he's a representative figure on behalf of all of humanity. A very similar person in that way, and this is biblical, I'm not making this up, is Jesus himself. He is a successful human, the only successful human, and it is his representative nature on behalf of all of humanity that gives access back to eternal life. So Adam, he's called the first Adam, is this Adam. The second Adam is Jesus Christ, right? Does that make sense? So a representative figure, the old Adam, the old way, the old nature is, when Paul says put off the old self and put on the new self, right? It's talking about like the difference between who is your archetype, right? Who is the first of the pattern of your life? Is it the old Adam or is it Christ? That's what the baptism represents, is the going down back into that chaos and being reborn as a new creation. So now the thing that happened to Adam is happening again with you, but now with the Spirit of God, of Jesus, his atonement work now working in you and things like that. So it says that when the form of man has the breath enter, he becomes a living creature, or a soul, your translation might say. This is the Hebrew word nephesh. Nephesh refers to the whole self. Okay? We in our contemporary English will say we'll conflate spirit and soul, right? Soul is spirit and body together. You can say my soul, and you can mean your spirit, but in the text, spirit is ruach and soul is nephesh.